going to be eating some cheesecake while we talk because I just had a long day at work and I am treating myself to a little bit of a little sweet treat. I don't think I could ever in the past consciously decide to do this and being okay with it. Like, I guess I did used to say like, oh, I'm so hungry and I just had a long day. I'm gonna eat this entire whatever. But I would always say it with such, like, there would always be a judgmental voice behind it of like, really, is that really what you should be doing? And kind of that. And lately there hasn't been any of that. So I'm taking advantage. So today I wanted to chat with you guys because I had this like crazy realization that I was definitely rushing my recovery. I realized I was rushing recovery when I noticed that I was just kind of getting very impatient with myself. I haven't had the urge to binge in quite a while. I mean, pretty much since I started recovery, but I have had bouts of emotional overeating and just feeling like I'm eating while being very not present. Also, sometimes I'll be hyper focused while I'm eating. So I'm like just so focused on the food and how much is left and how many more bites there are left, and just kind of going to the other extreme. And I was getting very impatient with it. I felt like, why am I still struggling with this? You know, your whole life doesn't get put on pause just because you're in recovery or just because you're dealing with an eating disorder. So life was definitely happening. And I was kind of getting frustrated because I felt like, do I need to put more into my recovery? Am I not being, intentional enough? And there is some space to say like, maybe I need to be a little bit more intentional. But there is also some space to say you need to give yourself some grace. You need to give yourself a little bit of just patience in general. About 3 months ago, I joined a kind of community recovery support group on Facebook. They do community calls once a month, and I realized like I need to really, actually the only reason I decided like, hey, I need to really join these calls because I was a member for 3 months and hadn't been to a single community call. So it's like, I really need to invest in this to know if I'm going to cancel this Patreon subscription, because I was looking over my finances and I was like, I want to cut some of this, like these smaller charges that I'm like subscribed to some app or some service. And I saw that one and I was like, oh yeah, I am still paying for that. And I haven't really participated on the Facebook like thread. And I need to know if I'm going to keep this, if this is valuable for me. Sure enough, I did the community call. You all kind of go around and do a check-in, kind of talk about your situation, maybe what's been troubling you, what's been going good, just kind of like support group type thing. In me explaining my situation and getting feedback, I realized like, oh, I'm rushing this. Kind of getting down on myself lately for not being further in my recovery. And I am like assuming that once I've fully recovered that somehow my life will be perfect. And I'm like, oh, I'm doing that thing again. Like I did with being skinny enough, like the concept of being skinny enough. And once I'm there, everything else will fall into place. And I was starting to do the same thing with recovery, seeing it as like once I'm recovered, everything else will fall into place. I mean, it doesn't mean that I can't look forward to a time where I will feel like a lot of the things that I am having to actively practice now are going to become second nature. But I do realize that like there were some signs that I was rushing recovery. Regression is kind of probably a sign that maybe you are trying to rush recovery. And that's what's bringing you you took a few steps forward and now you're taking like 5 steps back. obvious sign was the anxiety and discomfort I was starting to have around things that before, in the beginning of recovery, made me feel good. Things like choosing to have something sweet occasionally, choosing to maybe choose the less healthier option, something with less nutritional value, and not getting down on myself. Like, those things started to happen again, where I was like, oh, I'm really feeling judgy because of what I ate. The other one that I noticed was a lot of disassociation. Like, I was starting to disassociate a lot. I think another one were just the thoughts that I was having I didn't recognize them as being similar to old thought patterns because the substance wasn't the same. But like I said, I was in that thought pattern of, once I get there, everything will be fine. And that idea that anywhere else but where you are in that moment is better, and that anxiety to be there starts to come up. Not staying in the present and often thinking about the future and the past could be signs of also trying to rush recovery. Another thought pattern that might be indicative of trying to rush recovery would be trying to see it as like a to-do list. So thinking of recovery as very much as a check that off the list, instead of almost like seeing the process is the way of life, like that it's not something that you get to, but it's something that you practice on a daily. And all the other things that come with it, intuitive eating, gentle nutrition, will come in time, and they will kind of flow naturally. I was very much worried for my health, but also that kind of triggered me wanting to be on some gentle nutrition stuff and be like, no, I need to get this nutrition stuff down, especially as somebody whose tendency is to be very permissive versus restrictive. So I've always been physically permissive about food for the most part, and it was the mental restriction that was really messing with me. So suddenly I was like, no, but I need some physical restriction because I'm so permissive. Not realizing that mentally, if you're still restricting, you can't begin on that journey of learning how to be make the choice to not eat something from a place of recovery and not from a place of restriction, if that makes sense. So I found myself trying to just be at that place where I can do that. Not everything centers around my food choices, that my day isn't good or bad depending on my food choices. All those things that I knew before, obviously, and I've known throughout recovery, still needs to be practiced before I can really start to feel safe enough to make choices where I'm like, no, thank you on certain things. And actively so. I have, of course, had incidences where I'm saying no to certain foods that maybe before it was really hard to say no to. But to be on some gentle nutrition thing where you are thinking about the nutritional value of food, and that is entering into some part of the reason, but not the entirety, and you are being super mindful about it, that is a little further on, and I think I was just trying to get there. But just having a community, having people to bounce ideas off of is super important and can be very eye-opening. And yeah, as someone who's even in high school, I was group project, I'd rather work alone. I can now see in this recovery, it's already such an isolating experience, because rarely do you find people in your immediate circle that completely understand what it's like to have an eating disorder. So to be kind of even more isolating yourself and trying to just kind of go at it alone can be very lonely. And yeah, I think that the benefits of just putting yourself out there, being a little more vulnerable with people who are as well being vulnerable, is important. So if you guys are interested, I would check out Life After Diets podcast, because they usually in all their videos here on YouTube have a link if you want to join their Patreon and like have access to the Facebook group and all that stuff. I think it's been super useful for me. You guys can find me on there as one of the members, as one of the people in that community. Again, I haven't been part of that community as long as a lot of the other members. I think I just started maybe 3 months ago, but so far I was like, okay, yep, that's one of the expenses I'm keeping on my budget. So yeah, I'm gonna stop the video though, because I'm gonna finish enjoying this. But thank you guys so much for watching. I always appreciate your views, your thumbs up, I don't think I've received any comments yet, but they'll come eventually, maybe. Either way, thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode. And if you guys have anything you'd like to share, leave them in the comments below, or reach out to me on Instagram at excuse my thick thighs, and I will catch you guys on the next one.